We're here today with Scott Hyland, who is a teacher here at Liberty Christian Academy and is also the author of the 5 Laws of Liberty. He's considered to be an expert on our topic today, and we're really looking forward to talking to him. So how have you seen God removed from America?
I think when you ask that question, it's not just a removal or a censorship. I think that it has almost become hostile, that there's almost an anti-Christian bias. Bill O'Reilly said during the last presidential campaign when Governor Rick Perry was running for president, he said anybody of faith is going to get raked over by the secular press, and Mrs. Perry and Texas Governor Perry should have been ready for that, because that's just what's going to happen. I do believe there's an anti-Christian bias in the mainstream media in this country. I absolutely believe that, and I'm not wrong on this. You know, I say I could be wrong, I'm not wrong. And he basically says if you are a Christian and you tell voters that your faith influences your decision making, the secular press is going to cut your heart out. So it's something that is obvious. It's not just obvious from a Christian perspective. Objective thinkers are taking a serious look at this today.
So in 1867, the largest church in the D.C. area was held in the Capitol building. Looking at that and where we are as a nation now, how have you seen change?
Okay. I'd like to answer that question by recommending this book by Wayne Grudem. It's Politics According to the Bible. And when you ask this question, as far as the largest Christian church in D.C., there are a number of people that will ask the question, are we a Christian nation? And Wayne Grudem in this book, he actually gives criteria. He doesn't conclude that we are a Christian nation, but he asks questions like, did biblical principles influence the founding of our nation? And the answer is yes. Did biblical principles influence the founders of our nation and the documents that they wrote? The answer is absolutely yes. He goes on to say, is Christianity the largest religion in the United States? And again, the answer is yes. Did Christian beliefs provide the intellectual background that led to many of the cultural values still held by Americans today? Yes to all of those answers. But we have people of varying religions that live in the United States, and so our founders came up with this genius concept in the Declaration of Independence and then the U.S. Constitution to find a way to highlight principles, we call them inalienable rights or God-given rights, that are available to every person. As far as the largest church in D.C., it's interesting if you ask the question, do you think people could meet there today? They're actually going to have a gathering on May 7th. A pastor by the name of Dan Cummins from Texas, he started this organization, Washington Man of Prayer, and they're going to celebrate the 225th inauguration of President George Washington on May 7th. So they've received permission from Speaker of the House John Boehner to actually do that. So that should be interesting. There's supposed to be over right now 30 different members of Congress that are going to attend.
So it's said that there is a war on God in America as censorship of the acknowledgments of God are on the rise. Would you agree with that?
I would. I think there's a certain approach that we should take as far as that's concerned. You have different organizations like the American Civil Liberties Union. One thing that Wayne Grudem says in his book, he says the ACLU, after ACLU threatens, the cross was removed from a Los Angeles County seal. A high school valedictorian in Las Vegas, Nevada was told she had to remove all references to Christ from her speech. She chose to keep them in and had the sound cut off by the school principal in the middle of her address. So, I mean, you consistently hear specifically Christian censorship taking place within our nation. There's no doubt that takes place.
Kind of in reference to that type of education you teach here at Liberty Christian Academy, how do you see that being a benefit to these students' education, that you are able to be open in your faith?
I think that teaching at Liberty Christian Academy, we're truly exercising our freedom, because let's say if we teach on the process of evolution, the theory of evolution, we can present to our students the theory of evolution. We can also present the theory of creationism. I think as far as training young people to be open-minded and also training them to be able to defend what they believe, you could do that in a Christian school. In a public school, in a state school, you're going to be hard-pressed to actually be able to teach creationism. And the most recent statistics say that there are a large portion of Americans that reject evolutionary theory, and they're looking for an alternative. They're not going to be able to teach it in the state schools.
So what do you think the church's role is in this war on God in America and this censorship of God in America?
As far as what Christians can do to get involved, I would say significant Christian influence. I'm in agreement with Wayne Grudem. He gives some great examples. I'd like to share these with you. He talks about if you study Scripture, because there are Christians that say Christians should not get involved in politics. Well, if you study Scripture, you find men and women, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Amos, Jonah. You can walk all the way through Habakkuk. All of these people, they got involved politically. Esther, that you think of Daniel approaching a pagan king like Nebuchadnezzar and telling him that he was sinning according to a holy God. Daniel being another one. I think another thing to keep in mind when you think of the historical influence of Christianity upon society, listen to some of what Wayne Grudem says as you get into the influence of Christianity upon history. Historian Alvin Schmidt points out how the spread of Christianity and Christian influence on government was primarily responsible for outlawing infanticide, child abandonment, and abortion in the Roman Empire, outlawing the brutal battles to the death in which thousands of gladiators had died, outlawing the cruel punishment of branding the faces of criminals, instituting prison reforms such as the segregating of male and female prisons, stopping the practice of human sacrifice among the Irish, the Prussians, the Lithuanians, as well as among other nations, outlawing pedophilia, granting of property rights and other protections to women, banning polygamy, which is still practiced in some Muslim nations today, prohibiting the burning alive of widows in India, outlawing the painful and crippling practice of binding young women's feet in China, persuading government officials to begin a system of public schools in Germany, and advancing the idea of compulsory education of all children in a number of European countries. He goes on to talk about William Wilberforce being the primary force as a Christian influencing Great Britain to outlaw slavery. And then he goes on to talk about the primary voices of abolitionism in America, which led to the end of slavery, was the Christian voice.
With all of that in mind and how in many aspects we have seen God removed from America, what would be your prayer just as a believer and as a man of faith and as a scholar, what would be your prayer for America?
My prayer would be the Great Commission. I believe that Jesus never allows us to just simply shrink from current cultural conditions, that we have an obligation as Christians to stand firm in our faith. One of my favorite Bible verses, Galatians 5:1 says, "It was for freedom that Christ set us free. Keep standing firm and do not be subject again to a yoke of slavery." We're not to be surprised. Jesus himself said, "They hated me, they will hate you for my name's sake." Peter, the apostle, says that you're not to be surprised by the fiery ordeal that is among you. I think we've got to live and practice a biblical worldview. I saw recently a startling statistic by the Barna Research Group that said only 4% of Americans practice a biblical worldview. That's sad because a recent Gallup poll said that as many as 70% of Americans claim to be Christians. So what are we displaying before the people within our country? So I believe that we've got to actually live what Scripture teaches.
Well, Mr. Hyland, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Yes, and thank you. And I have a gift here for you. This is a book that I've written. It's called The 5 Laws of Liberty. And I would encourage you to read that. And if you practice the principles in that book, which are grounded in Scripture, I believe that it will allow you individually to be more free.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.